All right, good morning, everyone. This is a session of our county's Health and Human Services Committee. I'm joined by my colleagues, Council Members Glass and Rice. And today we are also joined by Councilmember Navarro, Chair of our Government Operations Committee. We have two items on today's agenda. First, we will be discussing the funding to support our service consolidation hubs. And second, we will be discussing the DHHS call center for Tier 2 calls from MC11 and call volume. We're joined this morning for our first discussion by Dr. Raymond Kroll, our Director of HHS, Mark Hodge, Special Assistant to the Chief Operating Officer, Jason Rendell from the Office of Management and Budget, Ms. Deborah Lambert, also from the Office of Management and Budget. And we are also joined today by Heather Bruskin, the Executive Director of the Montgomery County Food Council, and Netta Squires, the NCR Emergency Preparedness Specialist for the Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. Let me just make a couple of notes up front. One of the silver linings over this last year has been the way the community has stepped forward and provided support to so many residents in need. And there have been numerous examples, faith-based organizations, community leaders, civic leaders that on their own began forging partnerships and alliances to help address the crushing need that we saw, particularly in the early stages of the pandemic. And very much to the credit of our county's Department of Health and Human Services, they saw very quickly how successful these partnerships were and acted quickly to provide both administrative as well as financial support and organizational support to ensure that they met their full potential. I have visited, I believe, all of these hubs at some point or another, as my colleagues have as well over this last year. And several things always jumped out to me. Number one, the high level of sophistication and coordination in the dissemination of our volunteers and the coordination of the services. Number two, the love and the care that these volunteers and these leaders in our community provided to residents who were in need. And number three, how culturally diverse each of these hubs were, and they all took their own form based on the needs within their community. And I think it's been well acknowledged that one of, if not the first hub, likely the first hub, started in our Germantown community and was facilitated by a remarkable woman named Grace Rivera Oven, working with BlackRock Center for Performing Arts and Lynn and her team at BlackRock. Really were able to get a program that is exemplary and celebrated this last Friday its 1-year anniversary. And so this is terrific that we're having this discussion today as we think through facilitating how to continue this really important work and where we go in terms of its evolution and the next steps. And so we're thrilled to be having this discussion, but just did not want to miss the opportunity to just thank our community so much in HHS. This has been something I've talked about frequently, and I know my colleagues have as well, as something that gives me hope for the future. So thank you so much. Ms. McMillan, thank you for putting together this morning's packet, and I will turn it over to you to lay out the groundwork, and then I believe we're going to be turning it over to Mr. Hodge to give us a presentation. But Ms. McMillan.
Thank you. I also wanted to acknowledge Diana Tato-Niktash, who's been really instrumental in managing all the hubs, and I left her name off the memo inadvertently, so you didn't mention her as you were going through the attendees, so I wanted to acknowledge her work. Yes, you do have the two main issues, and you will get a presentation on the hubs. I did just want to mention that Mr. Mia forwarded an email to the HHS committee members yesterday about a request from the Fed committee to briefly discuss the Marbitco request around the money market program for the farmers markets. And I think after we discuss the hub consolidation issue, then we could turn to that, since you have a lot of the pertinent people here today. So that was the only other thing that I wanted to add to the agenda, and that would be followed by the call center. There is information in your packet, but you'll also get this presentation about the extraordinary work of the service hubs. And then we will talk about the funding that the executive has included and a proposal for how that funding would be allocated.
Perfect. I believe, Mr. Hodge, we're going to turn it over to you to walk us through the presentation.
Okay.
I didn't know if Dr. Kroll had any
Oh, I'm
opening
sorry.
comments.
That's totally my fault. Dr. Kroll, thank you. I always want to start with our department heads, and in particular you, sir. I really appreciate the nimbleness you showed and the leadership you showed in connecting the dots to make sure that you have nothing but great people in the Department of Health and Human Services, but you put folks on this project that really had the acumen to understand what positive thing we were dealing with here and kind of take it to the next level. So thank you for your leadership, Dr. Kroll. Before we turn it over to Mr. Hodge, Dr. Kroll, please.
Thank you, Councilmember Barbaros. Thank you, Ms. McMillan, for reminding Councilmember Albornoz.
Sorry, I need coffee this morning. My bad, Raymond.
Okay, I've already had mine and working on my second cup. But I'll be brief because I do want you to hear what Mark and the team have to say. But I want to start with just a first acknowledgement to follow your point, the group that has come together to coordinate this in HHS and across with OEMHS were phenomenal in their work. I mean, I could not have asked for a better group of get it done people to take this on, and they did it and did it well. They could not have done that without there being a group of partners across the community that made this live. The hubs came about as a response to the needs for food, but it didn't stop there. They obviously went on to they became consolidated hubs. And when Councilmember Navarro and I talked about this many months ago, we both were by the time we finished our conversation, very excited and jumping up and down, excited about the possibility of what a consolidated hub could be, not just during this pandemic, but beyond the pandemic. And I'm happy to say that this budget from the county executive reflects the commitment to try to make this an ongoing enterprise for the county. Case management, COVID-related perishables like masks and sanitizers, other non-food items, diapers and wipes, and you name it, the hubs embodied that name, Consolidated Hub, by putting all of that stuff together, and then moving on to things like testing or pre-registration events paired with food and consolidated hubs, and now moving to vaccination scheduling and appointments. So they have been at the hub of a lot of the work in the regions. So they are aptly named. This idea, and I think Mark and the team will talk about it some, is really, for me, a change in how partners come together and operate in the region. And it needs to be very partner-driven and partner-managed if it is going to be successful. The providers in the community have to be at the wheel to identify what those needs are, and to make sure that they are collectively meeting those needs. We've got models of this. We've got Thriving Germantown up county that pre-exists the hubs, and the East County, the Kresge model in East County, Eco model in East County that represents that. These hubs have come together in very unique ways that are shaped by, and it should be shaped by the needs of the regions that they serve. I think that has to continue to be the case. Otherwise, and they have to be partnerships. Otherwise, we just simply have stood up another agency in the community that will compete for resources. There's got to be a collaborative nature about these hubs. I think to that end, the county executive put it in the budget, and knowing that we enjoy council support for how we moving forward. So I'm very happy to be here today to talk about this. I think the other piece of this is that the partners and the hubs need to ensure that there's a linkage to county services and supports where needed. Partners can do a lot of this work and a lot of things with each other, but sometimes they do need to connect with us. And so this year we have been working to put some of our staff in places where they can link in those hubs and connected to those hubs so that they can have a point of contact to link back to HHS and additional services. That is my intention and goal is to try to make sure that kind of connection exists with the hubs going forward. So my hope is that we will, it'll be the start of a beautiful friendship and a beautiful relationship, to paraphrase or to steal from a movie. But with that, I will stop and say thank you all for the chance to come and talk about it, and look forward to seeing what kind of magic we produce and the consolidated hubs will produce for us in the year ahead. So thank you. I'll turn it over to Mark. You're good to go.
Okay, so I've tried to share my screen a couple of times, and when someone else starts talking, it seems to disappear, at least on my screen. So I don't know if it...
We can see it, Mark. We're good.
Okay, good. Okay, great. So thank you very much. My name is Mark Hodgman. I'm a Special Assistant to the Chief Operating Officer in HHS. I am joined today by Deanna Tato-Niktash, who is a Program Manager for the Food Security Program in HHS as well. She has been instrumental in assisting all of the hubs, all 8 of them, throughout the past year in the amazing work that all of them are doing and continue to grow in the work that they're all doing. And so thank you for the opportunity to talk about them today. So we have affectionately called them the Service Consolidation Hubs. They are very much a food assistance provider at their core, because that is where the greatest need has been over the past year. But that's not the only thing that they do. Dr. Cole mentioned a few other things, diapers, some case management, some other things. But really, there are a lot of services that these hubs are providing, and they're all consolidated within this one space. And there have been many nonprofits, churches who have stepped up to be the host for these hubs across the county. And we're very proud and happy that they've been able to join us in this new concept. Now the trick is figuring out how to move the slides when I'm sharing them. There we go. Oop. Figured it out. So these are the overall impact from all of the hubs, all 8 of them combined. We're serving almost 6,000 households weekly across the 8 hubs. Some are a little more fruitful than others, but overall 6,000 households. That includes over 10,000 children and more than 2,500 seniors across all of the hubs, for a total of about 27,000 individuals each week. They are distributing at over 35 locations and including 150,000 pounds of food every week. That's a significant amount that's being provided. Generally, they're doing it through donations from individuals as well as from the Food Security Task Force. We are providing bulk food and fresh produce to them through contracts that we have on a weekly basis as well. So they're getting their food from us as well as from volunteers from other donations. They've distributed close to 20,000 diapers over this, or do that on a weekly basis. We have a strong partnership with the DC Diaper Bank. We've also been able to provide additional funds to each of the hubs to purchase their own diapers, whether through Walmart or another bulk provider. We've been able to keep them swimming in diapers, so to speak. They have over 1,000 hours of volunteer work across all of the hubs on a weekly basis. This work could not be done without the volunteers that have stepped up to do this work with the churches, with the other nonprofits that are hosting these hubs, through either the distributions or through identifying and calling our residents, a variety of things that these volunteers participate on a weekly basis. We are providing home deliveries to over 500 households every week, and assisting on a rotating basis, obviously, 90 or more COVID households as well, either through food delivery or through COVID service packs that have thermometers and Tylenol and other needed items for people who are sick with COVID at the time. And then we have referred 57, we refer about 57 to 60 households for case management services every week. We have partners through Interfaith Works, Catholic Charities, Impact Silver Spring, who are providing some in-kind services, as well as we're also providing them with some funds to provide case management services at the hubs. So they've stepped forward as partners as well, and that's been really helpful. So, going backwards, sorry. Oh, and that's the end of the slideshow. Let me try that again. Sensitive computer. Let me show you where they are here. So the Up County, and they're listed in by number. It's not necessarily the order that they were created, but certainly the first one created was the Up County Service Consolidation Hub at Black Rock. That is number one up there in Germantown. The second one was Gaithersburg Cares at Seneca Creek. They were a little slow getting off the ground, but they have really over the past 2 or 3 months, now that they're fully staffed, have grown tremendously, and the city of Gaithersburg has been really instrumental in helping with that as well. They're also partnering with Cross Community Church and Ben Wickner, who has opened a space at Lake Forest Mall. So that has allowed the Gaithersburg Hub to grow tremendously over the past several months. And we're very happy with the work that's being done there. They're actually moving towards, I'm being a little ahead of myself, but they've actually moved into apartment communities to do their distributions, which has made a huge difference for the city of Gaithersburg and the places that they're providing services. Twin Brook is the third circle that's in through Interfaith Works at their clothing center. We added additional space for them at the Broom School to open the hub. And so they're also doing food distribution as well as their normal clothing shop that they have there. Number 4 is Mid-County at Harvest Intercontinental. That used to be named Bethel World Outreach. They've changed their name recently. That's in the only North Aspen Hill area. The Oak Chapel is in the 20906, the Lay Hill area of Aspen Hill. Number 6 is the Wheaton Glenmont Hub at Hughes United Methodist Church. Number 7, Silver Spring at Clifton Park Baptist Church in the Long Branch area. And then the 8th one in the East County at Kingdom Fellowship, which is now Kingdom Global, I believe. They just changed their name as well. So those 8 hubs all started at different times. The Twin Brook one was our last one to start in December, but all have made huge commitments to the work that they're doing and continue to grow in meeting the needs of the families in those communities where they serve. So I'm going to go hub by hub and show you kind of what each of the hubs are doing through the data that's provided by them on a weekly basis. They are serving on average about 878 households per week, which is about 1,600 children and 300 plus seniors. They are distributing about 16,000, almost 17,000 pounds of food per week through the Black Rock Center. And including in that is 233 home deliveries. A big chunk of those are at the mobile home park in Germantown, but the home delivery is kind of their sweet spot at Black Rock. We've been able to provide some funds for them to purchase some extra trucks. They've been renting some trucks. I think Manna sold them a truck for $1. One of their older trucks. And so they've been, home delivery is their big thing, as well as doing distributions. The Black Rock has opened up a distribution in Damascus, as well as a distribution in Montgomery Village. And so they've expanded their staffing to accommodate those additional locations. And so they haven't just kind of stuck to the Germantown area. They've expanded into Damascus and Montgomery Village as well, and have made great partners in both of those spaces. They distribute about 315 diapers on average per week, with 93 volunteer hours. You can see their distribution locations on the right. They do actually do distributions out of the Black Rock Center, but most of their distributions are done through at other sites and other partner sites. They're also doing COVID testing. They're doing COVID vaccines. They have a partnership with Care for Your Health and Dr. Izquierdo. I've actually volunteered there last Sunday to give vaccines with Care for Your Health, which was very exciting. I'm doing vaccines on a daily basis at Silver Spring, but it was nice to actually go and up to the Black Rock Center, not this past Sunday, but the previous Sunday, to also give vaccines there. So their partnership with Dr. Izquierdo and Care for Your Health has been really helpful, I think, for all the clients and residents that participate in their services. They do prepared meals. They provided Easter baskets, about 1,000 of them, I believe. I was up there right while they were packing them, and so there were lots of colorful baskets everywhere. They did participate in holiday giving and also do birthday boxes. So they've done some printouts. They've made some coloring books and provided some toys for their residents that they know have upcoming birthdays, and it gives that personal touch. It's not just we're not just providing. BlackRock is not just providing services to the residents. They're providing a personal touch to everyone that they serve. The Gaithersburg Care Hub at Seneca Creek Community Church is now serving about 1,100, almost 1,200 households, including 2,432 children and about 400 seniors. They're distributing about 30,000 pounds of food a week. That does include some of their the help that they're receiving at Lake Forest Mall through Cross Community Church as well. They're doing about 92 home deliveries and averaging about 60 COVID households. That's their sweet spot. They've always focused on the families that have been dealing with COVID since the very beginning of the hub at Seneca Creek, and have been working very closely with those households throughout the entire year that we've been in doing this. So they continue to identify and serve those COVID households to the best of their ability, and that really is their sweet spot. They have about 172 volunteer hours, and they have they're case managing about 9 families per week. They're also doing COVID testing. They're partnering now to do that. They have an eStall program that they're working with, a baby depot. They're also working now with a nonprofit, and I forget the medical provider off the top of my head, but they're also going to be starting to do COVID vaccines there as well. And they also participated in the holiday giving program. Twin Brook is serving about 447 households weekly. As I said, they just started, we're up and running in the middle of December. So they're our newest hub, and so their numbers continue to grow, however. But as you can see, their numbers are a little bit lower than what we've seen so far. They're distributing about 12,000 pounds of food. They have a very, they're entering into a very close partnership with Nourish Now. Nourish Now will likely take over the food assistance piece for this particular hub. It is something that we're encouraging all of the hubs to do, to use their food assistance partners where they can, to use the professionals as much as possible, to partner with them to do the food assistance piece on their behalf or with them in partnership out of that particular location. So Twin Brook is actually now working with Nourish Now, and it's been a great start to a partnership there. The Mid-County Service Consolidation Hub, one of them, of Mid-County, at Harvest Intercontinental Church, which was Bethel World Outreach previously, is serving about 490 households. They generally are coming from a little bit from Aspen Hill, some from Olney, some from other parts of Silver Spring. They have a drive-through distribution at the church on Saturdays, and they're also doing a distribution inside Leisure World on a weekly basis. They're serving about 799 children, 101 seniors, totaling 2,005 individuals, and distributing about 16,000 pounds of food every week. The 20906 Service Consolidation Hub at Oak Chapel, they are serving about 482 households. It's important to note that between Harvest Intercontinental, Oak Chapel United Methodist Church, and Hughes United Methodist Church, which is in Wheaton, they're all within very close proximity to each other. There are lots of people in need in the 20906 zip code and other parts of that Georgia corridor that they are all serving. But they end up sharing a lot of the clients between them. They are serving 951 children on a weekly basis, totaling about 2,032 individuals, and distributing 11,000 pounds of food. They are working closely with MANA at this point to try to help transition some of the distributions over to MANA. They had worked with MANA in the past, and so it was a good relationship that had already started, and so they're going to continue to do that. They have two distributions, one at Strathmore House Apartments and then one at Oak Chapel. The Wheaton Glenmont at Hughes United Methodist Church is seeing about 575 individuals or households, I'm sorry, on a weekly basis. That includes 1,115 children, totaling about 3,000 individuals and distributing 18,000 pounds of food on a weekly basis. They have a very strong volunteer core that they're using through their church, and they're also trying to grow. Right now, they're working on getting all of their kitchen equipment upgraded and making sure that they can get their kitchen licensed to be a commercial kitchen, so they can start doing some workforce development. Pastora Diana there is very excited about bringing women into the kitchen, teaching them how to cook, getting them experience in doing so, so they can help find jobs to cook in restaurants or other places. She's very passionate about this now. I've connected her with Janet Yu from Hollywood East Restaurant, who had previous to COVID had opened up a place to do the exact same thing. So I've connected those two so Janet can help Pastor Diana with how to get that up and running at the Hughes United Methodist Church. They also do sewing classes in Spanish at the hub. They're doing COVID testing and COVID vaccines as well. They have art and soccer classes for the kids. They are doing lunch distributions for school children 2 times a week. They have a coat closet, although it looks like now we're able to kind of get past that as the temperature is warm. They have a contract with, or they're getting money from the Community Foundation to do prepared meal deliveries. So they have contracted with several local restaurants, culturally appropriate restaurants, to provide food, prepared meals to those who have COVID, and they participated in the holiday giving campaign. Clifton Park Baptist Church in the Long Branch area of Silver Spring provides 1,033 households and including 1,400 children for a total of 4,000 individuals on a weekly basis. They have several distribution sites throughout the week. They have the benefit of being in Long Branch and have quite a number of partners through the Long Branch Partnership that has made this much easier for them to continue to grow and to bring in a lot more partners. So you see they have lots of different distributions on a weekly basis. They are working on starting to get COVID vaccines available at the hub. They are providing coats and baby clothes there. They are also have money from the Community Foundation to do prepared meals, and they are starting a food garden at the site. They have enrolled out through the Children's Opportunity Fund, I think. That's where that's where the focus is, I think, from them. I made the connections between the Children's Opportunity Fund and I forget her name at the moment, with each of the 8 hubs. And so she has had a conversation with all of them. And I know that there was interest from 3 or 4 of them to actually providing some of those services within their existing church space, their hub space. I don't know what happened to that or where that is, but the connection there was made. Anytime something new comes up, that is my first thought is, oh, maybe the hubs can do that. And in general, that seems to work out really well. Some of the things that the hubs are doing now are directly related to someone coming to me or someone coming to Deanna or somebody else and saying, oh, how can I help? Or I have this thing I'm doing. Can I also do that at the hub? So they have, to this point, the hubs have all been very receptive to adding things, to incorporating other new things. The Food Council, and I failed to mention this earlier, the Food Council with Heather Bruskin and Deanna Tato are holding monthly calls for the hubs. And so all 8 hubs and the leadership of those hubs get together on a monthly basis to discuss different things. They have a speaker. We've had Nonprofit Montgomery come and speak to them about how to do certain things. The equity hubs have had a discussion. So anytime some a new concept comes in, we want to bring it to the attention of all the hubs. We have that available to us as well, to be able to bring that to the attention of the hubs. I think anytime someone's interested in that question, it's certainly I'm certainly happy to do so. I know I'll speak on behalf of Deanna Tato as well, that she would be happy to bring this to the attention of the hubs as well.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And Dr. Kroll, I completely concur with your observation that having somebody focused on this as we transition to whatever it evolves into, to continue the incredible role that Mark has played in its coordination is really important to ensuring its sustainability. And so that's absolutely correct. I'll just note a couple of other points. As we think about this in broader terms, I mean, there's case management going on here, organic, but what, these families have brought issues to the attention of some of the coordinators of these hubs that they haven't shared with anyone else. And to the credit of those remarkable individuals, they have referred those folks and, in a sense, been navigators for them, in helping them navigate our very important and sometimes overwhelming system. And to Councilmember Navarro's point, acknowledging doesn't matter where you come in the door, you immediately get a soft transition or referral to an appropriate agency. So I think as we track data moving forward, it'd be good to see how many referrals were made into which respective agencies. And I think that will help be informative as well, as we collect that data, and that will help inform us as these evolve too. And then that'll also help us see which of those services, obviously in the last year, it's been the most basic services, rental assistance, food, diapers, those critical life-saving infrastructure issues, but it's going to become more sophisticated moving forward. Workforce development as an example. And because of these relationships, we can really help these families in a very unique and authentic and holistic way. Dr. Crow, it looked like you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the last, Councilmember Navarro's comments about the linkages, you, Councilmember Glass, and you gave all talking about the connectivity. And one of the things I really like about this is that it gives us a chance to really facilitate that connection between the providers. We've had case management navigator resources in the community for years. I mean, we've had, down in Silver Spring, our folks at Impact, we've had Identity, CASA, they've all done some pieces of that. This is the first time they have all been, there's been a unified place for that coordination and communication and connectivity to take place. And I think that is one of the beautiful parts about consolidated hubs, that it's not just the stuff that they push out to people, but it's they're being known as a place where people can come, and that there are other providers that are connected to them. So that, and when there's case management that's needed, case managers can refer to hubs for a lot of different things. The hubs can connect to homelessness, to housing resources, and to other kinds of resources. There is that need and can connect to us at HHS. We've stationed people at hubs as part of our staffing process to make sure that we had a live link and a warm handoff from a navigator or a case manager in the hub who's been out there working with providers to get folks networked, get a family networked or a household networked, but now knows that there's a need for some things that HHS provides. And so they can do that linkage back to us. So I think that becomes the one of the greatest things that the hubs can do for us. That communication's goes both ways. We have communicated to 1,000 partners across the county. The hubs give us a central place to share information with the partners about what's going on and what resources are available and what's changed in terms of access and capacity. So there's plenty of it's not just the things that they do, it's the community, it's the information that we share and exchange that will make this work going forward. So just to weigh in on that a little bit. And just a point, when you about what used to be, what we've evolved to. HHS followed, I think the county followed a model many years ago about co-location of services by human services, health and human services. So it's a model that has been tried around the country. This is different, fundamentally different, because it is about now the providers in the region who are together and us plugging into to them to provide, to understand and provide what's needed, rather than just trying to stand up little mini HHSs around the county. And so that's the thing. The other thing I like about this is that in my view of how HHS works, given time and no COVID to deal with, or less COVID to deal with, my sense of this is that HHS needs to now understand what's happening in each of the regions and begin to tailor how we think about putting resources and allocating resources to meet the needs, specifically identified needs of the regions. And those regional service centers directors and these hubs will be vital to helping us get a clearer picture of what's happening in those regions. So it will shape what we do. And there may be some location of services there, dependent on what we find and what we understand is a specific need. So it's the next evolution of service placement and resource allocation.
Yeah, and I'll just note two last points. This is going to be a cost savings in the long run, frankly, because if we're addressing the needs of residents who obviously are in crisis, and then they enter into the system, we're in a better position to be able to provide wraparound services. It will prevent many families from being in crisis in the first place. So I think it's a good model all the way around. Final point. I've shared this in a couple meetings I've been in recently, and it's good to have Ms. Bruskin on this call organically for this part of the discussion, because I know she's shared a similar vision in a presentation I heard recently. But 60 Minutes had this really cool segment a couple of weeks ago where they highlighted an initiative in the suburbs of Atlanta in which they've created these food co-op grocery stores. We already have one here. Manna Foods is carrying this model out right here. But it just struck me that as we transition the hubs in the long run, to Councilmember Rice's point about potential brick and mortar at some point, how cool would it be if we established more of these co-op-like opportunities in which families can use federally funded food stamps and other support services, county support services, but to go into a store that has a workforce development program, a partnership with our ag reserve, and especially nutritious food at very reasonable prices, targeted and that is culturally appropriate for the community that it's serving, and avoiding some of the logistical challenges of the long lines that we saw, through this last year, and providing, frankly, a more dignified way for families to be able to access, resources that they desperately need. And so that's a model I'd like to really fully explore and expand out and look at. And because I think that as we transition, I think we need to think through this next year to build a bridge to ensure the consistency and longevity. But we should also be thinking 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line of what this may evolve into in terms of some of those specific programmatic areas that have been literally life-saving for so many families this last year. So more of a thought, don't need a comment, but I really do appreciate everyone. Ms. McMillan, did we cover everything on this item on the agenda? Was there anything we missed?
Oh, you have a few things to do.
Great, let's do them.
Okay, so let me take you back to budget. And the first thing I do just want to note for you, but you've had a little bit of discussion about this, the budget for the hubs that we'll discuss in just a few seconds is for the hubs. It's not for food. There is no new appropriation in the FY22 recommended budget related to food because there are still existing funds. And as those funds get spent down, the executive is committed to bringing forth whatever needs to be brought forth in partnership with other efforts and fundraising to make sure that food can still be purchased. And Mr. Hodge has already talked about the continued purchase of food. But if you had any questions on that, Ms. Bruskin, Ms. Squires, Mr. Hodge are here. I did also just want to note that in discussions that we've been having, Mr. Hodge did note that there may be a need to buy more produce or meat or milk depending on what comes from the federal government. I think we don't fully know what's going to be coming from the federal government, given some of the recent announcements. But as you know, there have been some changes in the boxes that are available and their contents. So that's really sort of a mention of food. But if you had questions specific to food, you have folks here that could answer them, as well as Mr. Mia. Okay.
Great.
So the piece that is in the budget is the funding for the hub's operations, which is $3.6 million. This is a basic allocation, and what is in your memo to share with you is that council staff and executive staff, we've all been collaborating because we do need to have a framework for basic allocations for the hubs from this $3.6 million. And so we're bringing that to the committee today for your consideration. And the proposed allocation, and in this case, it's always hard to sort of think about, the hubs are all doing like such terrific work, but we've thought about them in sort of 2 tiers of hubs. And so there are 4 that are really serving sort of higher numbers of households, and 4 that at the moment are serving lesser. That could change as, you know, they are open for longer or their service areas change. But right now, the proposal would be to provide $400,000 each to Clifton Park, Black Rock, Kingdom Fellowship, and Seneca Creek as a base allocation from the $3.6 million, and then $300,000 each to Twinbrook, Oak Chapel, Harvest, and Hughes. Again, these are the base allocations. They do not have to purchase food from these. It would be for their staff and some of their operating expenses. Then in addition, there would be $150,000 allocated to Black Rock in recognition of their expanded service area into Montgomery Village and to Damascus, which was discussed how they have staffed up to be able to go into those service areas. There would be $250,000 in the allocation for the case management. This is done through Catholic Charities, Cheer, Interfaith Works, potentially other partners, but that would be an allocation related to the case management. The position that you've talked about in HHS is $104,500. And then that would leave just under $300,000 that currently is unallocated. And that would be available because we know that each of the hubs along the way may have specific needs during the course of the year. And so this would avoid, you know, allocating everything out and then not being able to be responsive to the needs that may come up. I would note within that the discussion that you've already had, that Black Rock will need some assistance in moving, as well as going back into Black Rock, as we talked about in a previous meeting, making sure that maintenance gets done to restore it to the theater. But we don't know, is that money needed in FY22 and FY23? That's not in this $3.6 million. We would make sure that if it could not be handled within funds that are already available, we'd make sure to bring that to the committee and the council for any funds that are needed associated with that. So that the $3.6 million is really around the operations of the hubs. And so staff wanted to present that allocation to the committee because it's important that the committee and the council have an understanding of where this $3.6 million would go in terms of the hubs being able to plan for their operations and work along with their other partners and sources of fundraising and volunteers.
Thank you. I'll just make 1 or 2 comments and then defer to my colleagues if they'd like to make any comments as well. I think this is a good and reasonable baseline. It acknowledges that some of the hubs are serving a broader population, and I appreciate the intentional support for unique circumstances like Black Rock, which have been noted. And I'll also note that, thanks to the federal government, frankly, we've received tremendous support. And all of these services have remained in Tier 1 funding priorities, through food security. And so this serves, I think, as a reasonable baseline going into next year, with the acknowledgement, as we have this last year, if adjustments need to be made to reflect the growing need in specific communities, we've demonstrated several times that we're ready to do that. But I think that this is good and reasonable. Colleagues, did you have any questions, thoughts? So without objection, then we go with the committee recommendation. Oh, Councilmember Navarro, sorry.
Well, I don't get to vote, but just an observation. I agree with you, Chairman Albornoz. This is a really good baseline. I think that, again, as we begin to think through the permanency conversation, acknowledging that there's no doubt that there are certain hubs that are located in areas where, of course, there is a lot more proximity to the communities that they're serving. Whereas there may be others where it's more difficult because people have to, they need a car, they need to be able to get there. And I think we need to take into consideration those characteristics and also take into consideration the landscape of the community-based organization in particular areas so that we can best leverage all of those funds. So for the long term, I would ask that we kind of almost like do an asset mapping of the unique characteristics of each hub. And because I think that drives some of the numbers that we're seeing, that in some places, let's say like, in Long Branch, it is so much more accessible to go to Clifton, for example, that it might be in some other geographic areas. And then again, do we have a robust network of community-based organizations that we are funding in those particular areas? And how do we then begin to grade all of that money so that we can ensure that we are maximizing the impact in those communities? I think that's going to be super important as well, especially with the ARPA funding coming through. What could we be taking advantage of that would be a one-time investment in some ways to build capacity? This is a prime opportunity to do that. So wanted to register that. And of course, it goes without saying that issues around cultural proficiency, linguistic proficiency are going to be key in how we either the coordinator that we try to that we're looking for, but also in terms of the services that are being provided in those communities, because that will also, as you said earlier, Councilmember Chairman Albornoz, reiterating the point that I had made about this helps us save money in the long run, because if we are absolutely there providing the service in a way that it has that impact, it helps us not, get to points of crises when then it's much more expensive and much, and much worse for those communities. So, anyway, again, I definitely will support the committee's recommendation when it comes to full council, with the caveat that as we're looking, towards the future, that we take into consideration those aspects as well. Thank you.
Yep, this is a down payment to ensure the longevity, and definitely want to expand on this moving forward and take into account all those components that Councilman Navarro mentioned. I'll also note, these hubs have not been stagnant. They proactively reach out to communities, not just wait for them to come to them. So there's a community outreach component to this too. Great. So without objection, then Ms. McMillan.
Okay. The next issue that is related to this funding is that the $3.6 million is designated by the executive as being from the Rescue Act, ARPA funding. While these are not one-time costs, we know we want the hubs to continue. I would agree that you can use the ARPA funding and as allocated in the budget, but I actually wanted to bring another issue to you around that, which is that there are unallocated funds that the council has agreed that they will look at after budget on how the allocation might work. The ARPA funds can be actually spent out through fiscal 23. They have a longer time frame than the original CARES Act did. And so my recommendation is actually to put a $3 million item in your category 1 planning, which is for items that you wish to consider after budget for the unallocated ARPA funds. And this would be for FY23 funding of the hubs. My concern is that this is such an important item that we need to be sure, and we know that the budget is tight. We're so thankful for the federal funding because it made it not be just a terrible budget, but it is tight. And so I think that in this particular case, putting something on the council's list as a way to make sure that there is funding to continue to transition this into FY23, and then, continue past that, but at least look at the unallocated funds as being reserved for this purpose in a future fiscal year.
That's a good suggestion, I think. Without objection. Without objection.
Okay. And then the next item, which is not in your packet, but was the request from the Fed committee to the HHS committee, was to briefly discuss the Mardipco request around the farmers markets. And I would ask Mr. Mia if he might be able to give you a summary of what happened at Fed, and then you could have a discussion of that.
Yes, good morning. The Fed committee, specifically Mr. Councilmember Friedson, had requested addition of $50,000 to the HHS budget to fully fund the Maryland Market Money Program. The base budget for FY22 for HHS does include $75,000. So the request was to fund additional delta, the $50,200. The program provides, among other things, assistance to farmers markets to provide food to households in need. And so that is the request as a summary.
And I think if the committee were to entertain this request, then it would just be good to have your direction of whether it is, category 3, which has to be funded immediately, or whether it would be something that you could come back to either as a category 1 or category 2.
This came a little late, and so I haven't had a chance to fully process this, and I'm generally familiar with the program, but maybe, Breskin, if you could just briefly describe for us what this entails and what this delta and funding would fund.
I'm happy to provide a little bit of an overview, and it's a really critical program that basically builds on a program that first started here in Montgomery County, doubling SNAP dollars at farmers markets. And so that started at Crossroads Community Food Networks Market in the Long Branch area. And so this is a program that basically takes county dollars and matches them with state dollars to expand the value of benefits dollars at farmers markets. So it leverages federal resources, it increases access to nutritious foods, and it also supports local businesses. So I think it's kind of a triple win in terms of the benefit of these dollars. And I look to some of my colleagues here to clarify any of these, but to the best of my understanding, this program had been long funded by Montgomery County government. And there was a change basically as a result of the pandemic. The nonprofit that administered this program for the state of Maryland closed in early of last year. And so as a result of that closure, there was some disruption in the program, and the funding for this fell out of the county's budget. And so the task force, recognizing that this was a really critical way to increase food access, put the money back in terms of county funding to ensure that operations could continue, and in fact expanded the amount that had been originally funded. So that would allow expansion to additional farmers markets and expansion to other programs. So originally had just been doubling SNAP dollars, but now this allows for doubling of pandemic EBT funding, as well as farmers market nutrition program and fruit and vegetable program through WIC. And so this has been a really successful initiative, but because it had been removed from the budget, the sort of base budget initially, now the hope is that we can put it back in and expand, not only sustain the expanded amount from last year, but also add some additional funding to allow them to expand to new markets and serve more populations as well.
If I can add real quickly, one of the things that we requested of the vendor who's providing this, Heather Holsey is the executive director for that. One of the discussions I had is if we're going to increase this, that we make sure that it is to farmers markets that are serving some of our more needy communities. We have farmers markets in downtown Silver Spring and in Bethesda and other places where these can be accessed, but what can we do to make sure that there are farmers markets in other parts of the county where they might have less access. To look at some more culturally appropriate foods that may be available. So that's kind of out of her or out of this particular vendor's control, but certainly something that she's interested in looking at. Part of the expansion would be some of these other farmers markets, these smaller farmers markets that can provide that.
And if I might, the only thing I would add is that this also applies actually to on-farm markets. That's a recent policy change at the state level. So it's not only farmers markets, but some businesses like Lewis Orchards is now able to accept these benefits as well. And so that supports additional communities that otherwise may not have access to a farmer's market.
Ms. Lucas?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Ms. Lucas. I'm with the Office of Managed Budget. And just quick background. So HHS had in their base budget $29,000 for this program. But then last year, ARPICO received additional funding through the Food Security Task Force for $75,000, which was used of one-time funding through CRF. And so they requested to continue to have that same level of support in FY22. And so the CE did support increasing the base amount to $75,000. But the request of $125,200 was not received in time, unfortunately. And so there was just a little bit of confusion about that. So I just want to clarify that the CE did increase the base amount to $75,000 to reflect what was given to them in FY21.
So if I'm summarizing, it sounds like the executive branch in principle is supportive of this request, just so long as it is directed to those areas that Mr. Hodge mentioned, or doesn't object, I should better say.
Right.
Okay. And had this request come in earlier, there's a strong chance the county executive would have considered it. Okay. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the explanation, particularly where the county executive is coming from on this and the request. And personally, I had the pleasure of going to the Crossroads Community Farmers Market for their official season opening, and that is one of the markets where this is more heavily utilized, recognizing the economic disparities that exist in our community, but wanting to make sure that access is there for families who want, farm fresh, healthy food. And it not only, I'll add this point, not only is it from the consumer point of view, but it is also from the seller's point. If you go to these markets, the diversity of services and food items that are there are really, it's really astonishing in a good way. And so I encourage everybody to check out these markets, buy plentifully, and you will eat well too. So I would like to move that we add this to the reconciliation list.
Second. Great. Ms. McMillan, could you review for the dozens watching at home the 3 tiers, because that's the other consideration point too, which one they fall into? Right.
So your tier 1 is actually what you would look at from Unallocated Rescue Plan Act funding. I don't think this particular item falls into that category. If you did want to consider it after budget, you could put it in your category 2, which would be items that the council would like to fund when other resources become available, or category 3, which is the list of things that are needed to be funded now within the budget so that they're available July 1st. And they would be using general funds as opposed to ARPA funds.
Tier 3, Councilmember Glass.
It sounds like it's a tier 3, given that there's, if I recall, $75,000 already in there, so we can at least start the fiscal year with some funding and then add to it. Sure, that makes sense.
Okay. Councilmember Rice, you're okay with that? Okay, so the committee has moved. I agree, but let's make it official. Raise your hand. All right, it is unanimous. So we do support the addition of the $50,000 in tier 3.
Great. Okay. Thank you. I think that is the end of the issues with the hubs and with food.
Great. And I am going to be going to Hollywood East for lunch tomorrow. So Janet, if you're watching at home, that made me really hungry hearing about it. So thank you for bringing that up, Mark. All right, we are going to move on to the second item on our agenda, which is a discussion regarding funding for the Tier 2 call center. And I want to, Councilmember Navarro had to leave, but I just want to acknowledge and appreciate and express my deep appreciation, as I know all of my colleagues do in the council, on her leadership on this. She raised this issue some time ago about the need to think through how to better transition calls from MC311 in the social safety net space and ensure that they're culturally appropriate. And so I really commend the executive branch for coming back with the recommendation on doing just that. I know there's some decision points before us, and we are also joined by Dr. Torregas, who is going to help us with this item as well, and to help guide our decision making. So with that, Ms. McMillan, I'll turn it over to you to walk us through this packet.
So this item is coming to you in the Department of Health and Human Services budget. It's for $635,708 to establish a separate call center for DHHS that would improve the response to residents calling for a range of human services needs. And while 311 is the main entry point, and it would continue to remain a main entry point, this would help the capacity within DHHS. But I also want to note that in the context of what has been going on this year. So we have had a food access call center. We've have a public health helpline. We've had a line to help folks with pre-registration. We've had outside lines that we've funded that the council's been very proactive with, like the line that is answered by CASA as part of the Salute initiative. So it's not a normal year in terms of call taking and the needs of our residents, and many of the folks working in the food access call line and on some of these other places actually have come from departments like recreation or libraries, or they are school health nurses. And as we reopen, they will of course be going back to their previous jobs and departments. So there is a need to provide a continued enhanced response for DHHS calls. We know that a lot of the folks that do call for human services really need a response, hopefully very shortly, if not at the time, because it's difficult sometimes for them to get a call back. And they often need like more time with a call. I know that during some of our previous briefings, we talked about the food service call center folks really sometimes spending 15, 20, 25 minutes, on a call with a resident who had very complex needs. So this would provide an enhanced service in addition to the Tier 2 customer service representatives that are at MC311. I wanted to say that in your packet, there is an outline of the costs associated with this in terms of the costs of the people working there and the infrastructure. One of the really interesting things about this is that the executive has sent this over using broker or contractual positions for this first year. And I actually think that that is a really key benefit to this proposal for right now. We know that we're still responding to COVID. We don't quite know what things will be like in another year. And by having these folks be contractual, we can get started very, very easily and very quickly. But it also allows during the course of the year to evaluate what is needed next. I would say that the converse side of that is that in the long term, if there is a decision to have more responsibility for intake calls and navigation right at HHS, you would eventually want to transition to make sure that you didn't have a lot of turnover in the employees doing this. Frankly, I can say, prior to 311, which is now many years ago, HHS did have an intake call center and had longstanding employees who were very, very familiar with the breadth of programs within HHS. And so I think if you were to make a permanent transition that way, you would move away from a broker position. But in fact, the broker positions are really a beneficial quality of this proposal for this year. And so with that, I think I would just say that I am recommending that the council approve this funding, but I did include several items that I think the system has set up, just as 311 provides reports to the council, that the calls that come in through this center also would need to do, and that would be things like the total number of calls, the calls transferred from 311, the categories of requests, the primary language of the caller, the number of callers where we had to use the language line, because we don't quite yet know what the language capacity of the person staffing the line will be, but they do have access to the language line, the length of call, and then the abandoned calls. And so I think with that as staff, I would recommend moving forward with the proposal.
Thank you, Ms. McMillan. Dr. Kroll, did you want to add anything? And then Dr. Torregas, I know I'm going to ask you to make a few comments as well from your perspective.
Sure. A couple of things, and thank you, Linda, for that overview of this. You know, I will say a number of things around this, actually. COVID made it clear that we have access and navigation issues for our clients whose needs are complex, whose HHS service needs are complex. The volume of calls made it clearly was overwhelming for everyone, but it also made it apparent that there are a lot more people living on the margins who need our help than we perhaps realized, and COVID has pushed some of them underwater, and they've shown up in numbers to get help from us to get back to the surface, to get on with their lives and get stable again. But more importantly, it's been the complexity of the needs that has created the challenge. So there's volume, and then there's how much time it takes to really process through those needs. And the comment that Linda made was spot on in this. We gave up the internal information and referral call center that we had with the creation of 311. And Councilmember Alvarez, you were a director at REC, so you know that you lived through that experience. I came shortly, I believe, I came as it was actually happening, and they were standing up 311. What got lost in that, what got gained was a centralized network for the whole county, but what got lost in that was the knowledge and depth of how and connectivity from the call center to the operations of HHS. And we've gotten much more complex, and the needs have gotten much more complex since it was created. The net result of that was that there's no single place where 311 could connect to, or where callers could connect to, where they had multiple service needs. And I'll say this to you now, and I'll say it again, that if you would think about the number of times that each of you or your staff have called either me or Uma, my predecessor, or a member of the department whose number you had, to say, hey, I know you're not the right place, but where do I go to get this? And if we were successful in connecting you and helpful, you kept the number and you used it the next time you had it. So the call center at bottom line is a place ultimately where people can go, where you can go, and or you can send people, or they can call themselves for what they need. And the staff will be designed, set up, and trained to be helpful and to go the distance with someone, so that they can stay with them for as long as they need to be there. You know, Linda noted we stood up multiple call centers throughout this process to field calls for food access, for rental assistance, for emergency cash assistance, testing, vaccination support. All those things kind of got their own entryways. As the food access needs shift, we're thinking not that this is the end of a food access call center, but really thinking about how do we rebrand that process so that food access can be continued, needs can be continued to be there. But also that center took on some of the calls for rental assistance, took on and backed up the calls for that came to for registration and for COVID questions when necessary. So that it began to be what we think should be ultimately is a centralized point of referral and networking for folks, so that people can take the time to spend with the client when they call in to respond to their needs. Right now it's a response network, but that doesn't, I think that ultimately it needs to be where someone is referred and we call them, but we need a system where people can call in and know that they're going to get an ongoing connection to the services that they need, and a place they can call back if things aren't working properly, so they can continue to get other needs met. When people know how to access what they need and there's one need. If they need housing, they know how to get to us. If they need crisis services, there's a direct connection. Those things are easy and straightforward. It's when they need those multiple pieces, they need someone to help think through how to walk you through and how to get you connected and to ask the right questions and to do it in a way that is warm and receptive and welcoming for folks. I think this model now is a transitional frame. So we shift more of the responsibilities for that in-depth work over to 311 and from 311 over to HHS. There's also a need as we go forward to think about long-term what's happening with the statewide 211 system and how do we connect with that, which is designed as a more social services piece. But because it's statewide, their response is going to be to refer to HHS. And they need a place where to make that connection as well, rather than having to figure out all the nuances of the department and solve those nuances. So I could go on around that, but I think I'll stop and simply say that the short term, we want to do this as a transition piece. Brokers make sense. We're still in the midst of the pandemic and its aftermath. But over time, we'll get a sense of what the inflated volume is due to the pandemic versus what the normal operating volume would be. And that'll give us a chance to figure out what needs to be part of the permanent structure of a call center as we go forward. And what those ongoing operating costs would look like. So I'll stop there.
Well, thank you, Dr. Crowell. That makes a lot of sense. And I'll just note quickly, just an observation. I know all of my colleagues, we've gotten record levels of constituent calls with people in crisis. So we can, all of our offices can speak in the first person about trying to serve as navigators here. And so I really appreciate you all stepping up this and acknowledge this. I think that plan makes a lot of sense on a lot of levels. But Dr. Torregas, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'll also note for future discussions regarding this really important matter, because it crosses over into GO and 311, I think it'd be good for us to have a joint committee session on this. For purposes of this discussion, it makes a lot of sense to move this forward. But when we talk about sort of that system building, and as we've had some time to reflect, especially going in FY23, I think it will make sense for us to incorporate both committees, but understand why we're doing it this way right now. But Dr. Torregas.
Yeah, thank you very much for involving me in your discussion. I'll remind you that back in June of 2020, you met with the Government Operations Committee to discuss surge calls. And at that point in June 2020, we were underwater. The MC3 owner was not performing well. And you, Mr. Chair, insisted, as did Ms. Navarro, that the county and the county executive should make a better effort to provide an end-to-end management process where someone coming into the county knew that the entire effort from the time they reached us to the time they actually received satisfactory service, that someone is in charge. And that coordination was very key. What happened after that joint meeting is that the Department of Technology Services, now called Technology and Enterprise Business Support Services, assigned people to look at MC3 on top to bottom and to make changes. And changes have been made. And the service levels have significantly improved to where now we're talking about single digits of drop calls. We're talking about responses within a minute and so on. So the only kind of advice I can give you is, one, I think GO and HHS should be reviewing these items jointly. Two, the happy news is that on May 6th, the Government Operations Committee will indeed take up MC311, and I'll make an effort as the analyst who manages that process to refer to your wise decisions I'm sure you will make and organize some kind of a way forward into 2022 and 2023. And then finally, I wanted to make a key distinction between an intake of a resident requirement and then the execution against that intake. I think what I heard Dr. Krause say is that he's very much anxious to move forward with stronger staffing for the execution of the concern. But the intake itself, especially when we've spent a lot of IT dollars to set up call centers, we've spent a lot of marketing dollars saying call 311. I think those expenses have to be carefully weighed. So my bottom line is I defer to my colleague, Ms. Linda, because she is the one who balances all the different moving pieces of the HHS budget. I absolutely defer to her. All I'm saying is I look and I see that you are looking at contractual staff that can be easily and quickly shifted around in terms of responsibility. I am somewhat concerned about the IT infrastructure costs, which will continue on into the future. But on balance, I think we need to be responding. And the pandemic, we all hope, will be coming to an end soon. So we all hope that we'll be able to manage more specific numbers of calls. So with that, I say I defer to my colleague for your decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dragas. Super helpful. So I think, thank you for that context. It's been so many moving parts, but yeah, absolutely. That joint committee session did generate a lot of discussion, and to the executive branch's credit, follow-up, which is good news. So, and I do think this will give us some time to evaluate not just the current circumstances that we're in, but what will be needed on the back end. And I'm sure there will be we will be intentional and ensure that there's a fusion, a merger between this tremendously important work and 311. So without objection, then I think we'll support Ms. McMillan's staff recommendation, and then we'll come back to this later into the fiscal year to discuss the next phase with GEO and HHS together. Great.
And then I think you are done.
I might go to Hollywood East today. Thank you all so much. Appreciate you. And so we are adjourned. Thanks, Al.
A challenge.